Okay, so we've been talking about ratios, and we always said that a ratio is just a multiplicative comparison of two different quantities. And today we're going to talk about a specific type of ratio called a rate. Now, a rate is a ratio, but it compares two quantities with different measures. So if you think back to our examples from our ratio video, our example was that we had a floral arrangement, and in that floral arrangement, for every carnation, there were 2 roses. Or maybe it was for every, it doesn't matter. We had carnations and roses. And we talked about in that video that you could have something called a part-to-part relationship. And our example was, what was the ratio of carnations to roses? And our other example, our other relationship that we could have was a part to whole relationship, where we talked about the ratio of carnations to flowers. Well, rates are a specific type of ratio because they only exist in a part to part relationship. Because a rate has two different types of measures, it doesn't make sense to have a total. And then we can get even more specific and talk about something called a unit rate. And a unit rate is where the second quantity in the comparison is just 1 unit, just one amount. So there are two different ways that we can find a unit rate. We can use a table or we can use division. So here's our example. It says a car travels 150 miles in 3 hours. So how many miles does the car travel per hour? So this word per right here, that's always going to be our hint that we're looking for a unit rate, because that per means 1. So I want to know, how many miles does the car travel in just 1 hour? Now, this is a rate because the two things I'm comparing are miles and hours. Those are the different measures. So again, it doesn't make sense to have a total here. Like, I can't take 3 hours and add it to 150 miles. They're different things, so that would not make sense. So if I'm looking for how many miles a car travels in 1 hour, I know that it goes 150 miles in 3 hours. So I'm going to use the table for the first one. I've got 150 miles in 3 hours. But I want to know, how many miles does the car travel in 1 hour? So I've got my table set up. My table is labeled. So now all I need to do is find a scale factor. Now remember, there are two places that I can find a scale factor. I can look within a ratio, or I can look between the ratio. So I actually have a scale factor here either way. So I'm going to show you guys both. The very first scale factor that jumps out to me is going between. The scale factor to go from 3 to 1 is to divide by 3. And what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 150 divided by 3 would give me 50. So that car is going to travel 50 miles per hour. So when you see that sideways slash like that, that means per. Or we could also write this as MPH, miles per hour. Now the second scale factor that is there, and again, it should give us the same answer, is I also see a scale factor within. 3 to 150 would be times 50. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. And sure enough, 1 times 50 would give me 50. Both scale factors work. It's just whatever your brain sees first. Now, with the division, I can set this up as a fraction. Remember, that's one option as a way to set up ratios. So whichever unit, whichever measure is going to become the 1 unit, that part of our unit rate, that's going to go on the bottom. So I've got miles over hours. So this is 150 divided by 3, which would give me 50 miles per hour. Let's look at one more example. So our next example says 18 gummy worms contain 45 grams of sugar. So I want to know, how many grams of sugar is in each gummy worm. So I'm going to set up my table with labels. So I'm going to do gummy worms, 2 grams. So I've got my table label. Let's set up what we know. We know 18 gummy worms, 45 grams. And I want to know how many grams of sugar is in each gummy worm. So again, that word each right there is going to tell me that I just want 1 gummy worm. So I've got my table, label, all that's left to find is the scale factor. So when I look at this, I don't see a good scale factor within from 18 to 45. But I do see a scale factor from 18 to 1, which would be divided by 18. What I do to the top, I have to do to the bottom. So I'm going to set up my division problem. 45 divided by 18. 18 is going to go into 45 2 times. 2 times 18 gives me 36. When I subtract, I get 9. And then I need to add a decimal and a 0. And I know that 18 is going to go into 90 a total of 5 times. And just to show, 18 times 5, 8 times 5 is 0, carry the 4. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 4 more is 9. So I get exactly 90. So each gummy worm contains 2.5 grams of sugar. Goodness gracious. So I can write my final answer as 2.5 grams per gummy worm.